Privacy is a little bit like art. When we can't quite describe it, but we know what we like. And what we like is to be able to keep certain pieces of information confidential from people that we don't think should know. It could be something controversial. It could be something embarrassing. The point is, we all like to think that we know what privacy means to all of us. My interest in privacy law came about from my research into national security. You have these shadowy, secretive spy agencies and undercover police tapping phones and raiding drug dens. It's all very exciting. But in order to know what these agencies do and how they can do it legally, you need to understand how the law protects your personal information. That's why I'm here today, to talk to all of you about privacy and how the law doesn't always agree with what you might think privacy is. So, without further ado, let's go to the beach. It's lovely, isn't it? Sun is shining, waves crashing. It's very Australian. But it turns out that the beach is actually a really wonderful metaphor for privacy. Because you see, when you go to the beach, you're making deeply, intensely personal choices about what you want others to see, what you want others to know about you. You might cover up with layers upon layers, or you might feel more comfortable in swimmers made of fishing line and coconut halves. The point is, you're making these decisions about something that is intensely personal to you. Privacy is different for all of us. It's different for me. It's different for this audience. Privacy is different for people with a disability. It's different for people of colour. It's different for our first Australians, and it's different for those perhaps from other countries who might now call Australia home. But our law tries to boil these concepts down into a single definition, to tell you what privacy is and what it isn't. Imagine before setting foot on the beach, you have to sign a densely worded 30-page legal document that you barely understand. It says everything that you do on that beach can be recorded and used for any reasonable purpose a company wants. Because you see, that's how privacy operates in reality. When you sign these documents, our privacy law allows for something called a bundled consent. So you have to accept a company's policies, their terms and conditions, their fees and charges, or you just can't use their service. Okay, I hear you say, I'm not going to sign that legal document. And that's fine. That just means no beach for you. No appeal, no review. Just no beach until you sign. You see, Australian law takes the position that companies out there are going to collect your personal information, and it tries to make them act responsibly when they do it. But as we've seen with some of the big banks and some of the telcos, they don't always seem to take these responsibilities very seriously. I want you to imagine sitting on the beach, enjoying the sunshine, having a conversation with your best friend. Random stranger approaches you and says, "How would you like to buy a television?" It's a bit strange. You ask this random stranger why they're bothering you. And they say, "I heard you speaking to your friend about how you might want to replace your TV soon." It's a bit creepy, isn't it? But this is what our privacy law allows. It allows for companies to use your personal information for advertising and for marketing. They can perform what's called an aggregated analysis, where they take a look at the goods and services that have been bought by people of your age, your ethnicity, your gender, even your postcode, and then they try to sell you the same things. If you're a member of a loyalty program, well, then they know what you've bought, when you've bought it, and how much you paid for it. It could be even worse, walking into a brick and mortar store, because just crossing the doorway, you automatically consent to the collection of all types of personal information. Now I want you to imagine that the creepy TV salesman uses that same pitch on your son or on your daughter. Because another thing our privacy law doesn't do very well is discriminate between adults and children. A number of years ago, some gambling companies got themselves in quite hot water because the ads for their services were appearing during YouTube videos for kids' shows like Dora the Explorer. The beach teaches us other things about privacy as well. It teaches us that at the beach, much like the online and the physical world, people are there for different reasons. Some are there to play, some are there for exposure, some are there for work or for money, and yes, unfortunately, some of them are there to do something questionable, maybe even illegal. And our privacy laws mean you might not always know who's up to no good. You might remember back in 2019, an app went viral for the ability to upload a headshot of yourself and see what you'd look like in 50 years. Except that the terms and conditions of that app, which, let's face it, you probably agreed to without reading, say that you give the app complete and untraceable access to all of your photos. You also give the developers of that app what's called an irrevocable, perpetual, royalty-free license to your images, meaning they can use them for what they want, when they want, forever, and they don't have to give you a cent. And of course, the headquarters for this particular app was in St. Petersburg, meaning that the Russian government could also have access to your photos pretty much any time they wanted. The beach can teach us something else about privacy that's really important as well, and that is that context matters. You might be comfortable heading to the beach in your revealing swimwear. You might be comfortable with people looking at you. You might be comfortable with them staring even. But what about if they start taking photos? What about if they start selling those photos right in front of you on that beach? Well, that's not okay, you say. But how do you stop them? Because you see, in Australia, unlike other countries, you don't have a specific legal right to privacy. Let's take, for example, streaming services. They're great, aren't they? You can sit and watch entire series of your favourite TV shows without ever leaving your couch. But in exchange, you give these companies a wealth of information about yourself. You tell them what movies you've watched, which trailers you've previewed. You even tell them how much of that scary movie you managed to get through before you turned it off. Now, you might be okay with your streaming service having all that information. And you might justify it to yourself, saying that this streaming service has that information so they can tell me when the next episode of my favourite TV show comes out. You might be okay with that. But what about if they bundled up your information and they sold it to someone else? Because you see, our law doesn't require them to tell you when they do that. They don't have to tell you who they share your information with or when. So what about if your streaming service sold your viewing habits, as extreme as they might be, to your health insurer? What about if your health insurer decided to raise your insurance premiums because they thought you were watching too much TV and not getting enough exercise? The point is, you've got, in that situation, no appeal and no review. The insurance company won't tell you how they recalculated your premium because you might cheat the system then. And the streaming service doesn't have to tell you when they share that information or who they give it to. It's all legal. It's all above board. So I'm going to go back to our beach one last time. It's been a lovely day. You're packing up. Everyone's sunburnt. It's time to go home. Anyone who's ever spent a day at the beach knows afterwards you find sand everywhere. Now I want you to think about the last day that you spent at the beach and still finding sand 6 years later. Why 6 years? 6 years is the amount of time that a telecommunications company can keep your personal information after you stop being a customer under their industry-wide code of conduct. But the privacy law actually gives them a lot more than that. It allows them to retain their customer information for as long as it is reasonably necessary. I want to let that sink in. As long as reasonably necessary. Now, I can think of at least 2 problems with that. The first is that if the company can say that they're still using your information for advertising or marketing, let's say, theoretically, they could keep your information forever. And the second thing is, we kind of just all assume these companies are doing the right thing, but we never really check, and the government just doesn't have the resources to make sure everyone's doing the right thing. So now, I want to invite you to a European beach. It's not really as inviting, is it? But actually, from the perspective of privacy, it really is. Because just like that empty beach up there, in the European Union, you have a right to be forgotten. Now, that's a legally enforceable right that when you are no longer a customer, the company must delete your information. You get other rights in the EU as well. You have the right to opt out of certain types of information collection. You get the rights to object to particular types of processing. And you get the right to ask, in fact, demand that companies tell you what they're doing with your information. So why is it like this? Well, the EU, unlike Australia, takes the position that privacy is a human right, as it should be. Privacy is such a unique and intensely personal concept to each of us that it is like our fingerprint or our DNA, and it deserves to be protected as strongly. So, what we need in Australia is to transplant those laws here. What we need is a little bit of that European snow on our Australian beach. We need those rights here. Now, there is a national privacy review going on at the moment, and it's started to make some promising steps in the right direction. Any company anywhere in the world that handles your information is now covered by our laws, and they can be fined up to $50 million every single time they breach your privacy. But more needs to be done. So, where does that leave privacy? Well, it's in the same place as when you all walked in here. It's in the same place it is when you go to the beach. In your hands. We like to think that we are powerless in the face of big tech and digital commerce. But we can start being critical. We can start asking questions. We can start making noise about privacy, that it is something we care about. We can start taking our business off companies that don't respect our privacy. And we can email them and tell them to delete the information that they hold on us. Collectively, we can all recognise that privacy is a human right. We just need to start putting the human back into that right. Thank you.